Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a wild trip into the world of retro gaming, where cartoon pixels turned into pixelated violence. These are the top 10 ultra-violent, bone-crushing TurboGrafx-16 beat-em-ups that definitely push the limits. If you love crazy brawlers, brutal animations, and games that parents use to panic about, make sure you like and subscribe so we can bring you more retro chaos. China Warrior. China Warrior is one of the earliest beat-em-ups on the TurboGrafx-16, and it was famous for its huge character sprites. The whole game looks like a side-scrolling martial arts movie where a giant karate fighter punches and kicks every living thing in his way. Enemies fly across the screen, explode dramatically, and basically turn into airborne ragdolls. The violence stood out because of how oversized everything was. When a punch landed, it looked like a screen-sized earthquake. The game wanted you to feel every hit, and sometimes it felt like a giant action poster that suddenly started moving. The good thing about China Warrior is that it looks awesome for an early console game. The animations are smooth and the character art is detailed. The bad thing is that the gameplay can feel stiff and repetitive. You mostly walk forward and swat enemies like flies, and the hit detection sometimes feels weird. Still, it's a piece of TurboGrafx history and definitely a flashy example of 80s arcade-style violence. Splatterhouse. Splatterhouse was the game that parents saw and immediately said, "Absolutely not. You play as Rick, a muscular guy wearing a mask that looks suspiciously like something from a scary movie. You fight through monsters, demons, and disgusting creatures while wading through blood, guts, and horror movie gore." The violence in Splatterhouse went up a level. Enemies explode into chunky bits. You smash monsters against walls, and the whole game feels like a side-scrolling horror festival. The graphics were shockingly detailed for the time, and the levels were filled with creepy ideas like haunted rooms, floating heads, and possessed furniture. One of the best things about Splatterhouse is how atmospheric it is. The music, backgrounds, and slow crawl through creepy areas make the violence stand out even more. The downside is that the controls can feel slow and some levels punish you for tiny mistakes. But it became a cult classic because TurboGrafx players had never seen a game this bold and bloody before. Vigilante. In Vigilante, you fight street gangs who kidnapped your girlfriend. The story is simple, and the action feels like an old 80s action movie. You punch, kick, and use chains and clubs to knock out bad guys. Enemies fly across the screen when you hit them, which makes the fights look wild. Some levels take place in dirty alleys with broken cars, and others happen on rooftops, where enemies jump at you without warning. The violence in Vigilante looks big and dramatic. When you hit someone with a chain, the game shows a huge reaction. Enemies fall down, disappear, or get kicked far away. The attacks are large, flashy, and loud, kind of like a comic book fight. Even small enemies show up in big groups, so there is action happening almost all the time. The best thing about Vigilante is how quick the battles feel. You do not have to wait long to hit something, and the game keeps the action moving. The downside is that the game is very short, and many enemies repeat the same moves. Once you learn the patterns, you can finish levels fast. Still, people who like fast beat-em-ups enjoy it because it is exciting and fun for short play sessions. It is the kind of game you may pick up for a few minutes, but then keep coming back to because it feels like an arcade game at home. Ninja Warriors. Ninja Warriors puts you in control of robot ninjas who are trying to stop an evil empire. Yes, they are cyborg ninjas, which makes the fights even crazier. Instead of just kicking and punching, you use metal blades and fast robot attacks. Enemies get sliced, smashed, and thrown across the screen. The levels take place in dark, futuristic streets and giant metal bases. You keep walking forward while waves of enemies jump in to fight. When you hit them, they break into pieces or disappear in sparks. and the music is fast and loud, which makes the battles feel even more exciting. The game looks violent because your attacks destroy enemies very quickly. Some enemies vanish right away, and others fall apart like toys. The battles feel like a ninja action movie, where every strike takes someone out. The best thing about Ninja Warriors is how smooth the gameplay feels. The controls respond fast, so you can move, jump, and slash without problems. Each robot ninja has special moves that look cool and deal a lot of damage. The downside is that the game can get repetitive because the levels are long and the same kinds of enemies show up again and again. After a while, you start seeing the same robots over and over. But people who like ninjas and robots still have a great time. The fast action and non-stop enemies make it a fun game for beat-em-up fans. Bravo Man. Bravo Man is strange, loud, and totally ridiculous. It mixes satire with beat-em-up gameplay. The main character stretches his arms like rubber, slapping enemies across the screen and sending them flying. His punches and kicks look silly at first, but the game shows big reactions when they land. The animations are exaggerated on purpose, and that makes every hit look extra powerful and funny. The violence in Bravo Man is silly, but it's still intense. Enemies explode, fall apart, and disappear in puffs of colour and sparkles. Some enemies flip upside down, spin, and vanish like cartoons. The game mixes martial arts brawling with superhero comedy, so every fight feels like a joke and a battle at the same time. Bravo Man stands out because of its humour and creative fighting style. The game is full of silly sound effects, bright colours, and goofy characters that make it feel like a Saturday morning cartoon. The bad side is that the controls can feel slow, and some levels go on much longer than necessary. Enemies sometimes repeat too often, which can make parts of the game feel tiring. Even with those problems, Bravo Man became memorable. People still talk about it because there weren't many games where your main attack was giant noodle arms smashing villains across the screen. JJ and Jeff looks cute at first, but the game has some shockingly dark humour. Players control two clumsy detectives who fight criminals and weird enemies across colourful levels. The violence may not look realistic, but the slapstick style is wild. Characters get kicked, punched, flattened, burned, and blown up. The original Japanese version was even more extreme, with toilet jokes, potty humour, and enemies spraying stuff from places that should never be shown. The game tries to make players laugh while also making them stare at the screen, wondering what they just witnessed. Some enemies pop out of nowhere, and hazards appear that feel more like pranks than real danger. The bosses are strange too, and a few battles feel like a comedy show mixed with a beat-em-up. The controls are simple, the music is catchy, and some of the boss fights are fun. There are hidden areas, secret jokes, and weird animations that surprise players even today. The downside is the platforming can be rough and the hit detection is not always fair. Sometimes players slip off ledges or miss jumps that seem easy. Even so, the nonsense comedy makes the game stand out. It is silly, loud, and full of ridiculous fights. Rastan Saga 2. Rastan Saga 2 is all about swinging a sword and smashing monsters. You play as a strong barbarian who fights dragons, skeletons, demons, and pretty much anything that attacks the game. Is very violent for its time. Enemies break apart, blood flies everywhere, and the giant bosses look scary and huge. The world has dark castles, lava, traps, and big spooky dungeons. Some stages feel like a dangerous maze with spikes, fire, and breaking platforms. Hitting enemies feels powerful, and the music sounds loud and dramatic, like an action movie. There are power-ups that make you stronger, and getting a new weapon feels awesome when enemies go down fast. The animations look smooth, and some enemies crawl or jump towards you in creepy ways. The boss battles look huge and crazy, with monsters throwing fire, claws, and magic. The hard part is the difficulty. Some areas are not fair, and enemies can drain your health super fast. If you fall, miss a jump, or get stuck in a corner, you can lose a life very quickly. Some players also felt the controls were slow during tough fights, which made things stressful. Even with these problems, the game still looks cool and feels exciting. The wild action and intense battles made it a favourite for players who liked tough fantasy games. Legendary Axe. Legendary Axe may look like a simple forest adventure, but every swing of the axe feels heavy and loud. The main hero fights through jungles filled with wild creatures, armoured warriors, and deadly traps hiding in bushes and caves. When enemies go down, they fall hard and look like they were hit by a truck. The violence fits the rough world, and battles feel intense from start to finish. Players can charge up attacks to deal massive damage, which makes combat exciting and fun to master. The soundtrack has a cool tribal style with drums and chants that sound wild and mysterious. The world design is creative, full of cliffs, bridges, caves, and ancient ruins. Some areas look peaceful at first, but enemies jump out and make the player react fast. The flaws show up in enemy repetition and tricky jumps that need perfect timing. But the boss battles are the main highlight and are full of dramatic hits, brutal takedowns, and giant enemies that fill the screen. Many players remember the big battles, the powerful music, and the feeling of swinging the axe and smashing through anything in the way. Even with a few rough edges, Legendary Axe became one of the most talked about action games on the TurboGrafx-16. Samurai Ghost. Samurai Ghost is about a samurai who comes back from the dead to fight huge groups of monsters. The world in the game is dark and creepy, full of ghosts, demons, and other undead creatures. The game has a lot of violence. Enemies get sliced apart, blown up, or cut into pieces. The samurai uses big weapons that smash anything in front of him. The art style uses dark colours, scary monsters, and spooky temples, so everything looks dangerous and haunted. Some levels feel like weird dreams with traps, ghost soldiers, giant spirits, and cursed bridges. The controls can feel stiff, but the game looks very good for its time. The backgrounds show fog, lightning, and creepy faces carved into rocks and walls. The sound effects are loud, and every hit feels powerful, like a big crash on the screen. Some monsters scream or roar before they disappear, which makes battles feel dramatic and exciting. The music also adds to the spooky feeling, with drums and sharp notes like old samurai movies. The only problem is that the main character moves very slowly. That makes boss fights harder, because bosses attack fast while your samurai feels heavy, like he is dragging a huge weight. Even with that problem, beating a boss feels great because the fights look huge and intense. Many players remember Samurai Ghost because of how cool the monsters look. Tada Shingen. This game is based on the famous Japanese warlord Tada Shingen. Players fight clans, soldiers, ninjas, and rival samurai in side-scrolling battles that feel like old battlefield stories. The action focuses on sword combat, and the hits look painful and direct. Soldiers fall, bleed, and vanish as players cut through waves of enemies, and the fast swings make every fight feel dangerous. The game tries to mix history with arcade action. The music sounds dramatic and loud, almost like a war drum before a battle. Some parts feel exciting, especially when enemies surround the player and every swing counts. The problem is the controls. Many players thought the movements felt clunky, and sometimes the character did not respond fast enough during tough fights. The difficulty also jumps around. Some stages are fun and fast, while others take too long and feel slow. A few enemies repeat too often, and getting hit by cheap attacks can be annoying. Even with these problems, Tada Shingen has charm. It shows a time of samurai battles, honor, and sword duels. The game feels different from the sillier beat-em-ups because it takes itself seriously, and players who enjoy samurai stories still talk about it today. Marvelous Verdict. These TurboGrafx-16 beat-em-ups brought more than punches and kicks. They delivered exploding enemies, flying body parts, and wild animations that shocked early console players. If you had fun going down this retro memory lane, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us which game was your favourite. Get ready for more retro mayhem in the next video.